Greetings. We here at PLD Projects want to make it known that we wholeheartedly support the strikes by both SAG-AFTRA and the WGA against the greedy corporate studio executives. It is a fight for basic human decency. Our reviews, discussions, and critiques are in no way supporting the studios, merely dissecting the art and how these wonderful actors and writers continue to influence us on a daily basis. We thank you. PLD. PJ Campbell. Two mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are two mediocre white dudes on film.
You know, we did that thing again. That thing, 3D.
3D, we're going to get you in 3D.
We did the thing again where we practically recorded an episode before we even started. Like,
so bad.
It is impossible for us to get on call to do the podcasts without just like talking and hanging out, and then we just start talking about all the stuff we're going to talk about. And I feel like people miss another 20 to 30 minutes of us talking and doing things because we just don't know how to stop talking to each other.
One of these days, I'm just going to hit record as soon as you come on, and then I'll edit it out and show it as a bonus later on or something. This is what you missed. We first talked about everything we're about to talk about. Half our conversation is always about, well, I'm going to talk about this on the show, but I got to say this. It's like, why?
Yeah,
why do we have to say this?
We're just really good at sidetracking ourselves and also being like, hey, you fuckface, you fell asleep while we were talking last night. I'm sorry, I got a new bed and a new weighted blanket, and I was just the right amount of stoned that I passed out. Paul, what do you want from me?
You know what, I gotta say, I can't argue that. I love a good weighted blanket. I got a weighted blanket. It is like, I can't sleep without it now.
I know.
I go to a hotel. I go to a hotel room. Like, where's my blanket? Where's my weight? I need something. Oh, I need it on top of me.
Dude,
it's so comforting.
That thing just the way that those weighted blankets, like when they're on you just right, and they just kind of sit, and that feeling of comfort and just like relaxation that you feel. And if you're just the right amount of stoned, it's just like a warm hug, and you're living in a moment that you don't want to leave, and it's the best.
It is the best while you're watching a big scary horror movie.
And you know what, man? I bought a new bed. I'm such an adult. I bought a new bed.
I know, adulting. This is a weird thing for you, PJ.
It is. It's a weird thing for me. Thank you. I feel like such a grown up. I bought a brand new bed, and it's the most excited I've been about anything in a good while. You know how much I like a nice bed?
The last time I bought a new bed was a very long time ago because I had kids, and I don't have time or money to buy myself new beds anymore. But it's okay. I mean, eventually, when the kids move out, then I'll get a new bed again. And I'll I
need to once again remind you, in the undisclosed place that I live, there is a couple of houses for sale right around me for you and Kim to, just make your way out here and finally be my neighbor. Don't you want to be my neighbor?
Just outside of Crystal Lake on Elm Street.
Yeah.
How to get Friday? I don't know.
In Haddonfield.
In Haddonfield. There you go. In Haddonfield. Yes.
Yes. It's along Crystal Lake in Haddonfield on Elm Street.
It's perfect. It's a perfect setup for us. I couldn't live anywhere else.
In the new state of Woodsboro, mind you.
New state of Woodsboro. Okay. Fair.
I could keep going, but
right.
I'm not going to. That just seems gratifying.
So let's get into our episode of talk that we already did like a half of an episode for. Let's get back and start.
It's 5 minutes. You're trying to jump into this already. What are we doing? People want, random talking points, Paul.
For once,
they want to hear.
For once, I wanted to see what happened if I just jumped in, and I knew you were going to derail it. I knew you were. I was going to say, I'll throw it in there. I'll start it, see what happens, and I knew you were going to do it. That's okay.
the people demand that they come to our podcast to listen to one thing, but also get conversations about other things. That was the top comment on our last video is, I couldn't be happier. I come to listen to Friday the 13th talk, and I get to hear you guys talk about Doctor Who. Like, people love us, Paul. They love what we do.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, I don't know why, but I'm happy for it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
that's fair. I was actually, speaking of, I've been re-listening to the Time War series
okay. Okay,
of
fair.
Doctor Who with Paul McGann, and I'm listening to Time War 5 right now, which is the one where Cass has come back, and we don't know how Cass and the Eighth Doctor could have met before Night of the Doctor. Dude, those 4 episodes are so fucking good, and
That
they're
might be worth
very, yeah, I think you need to jump in there. And like, there's kind of a 11th Doctor Stephen Moffat era vibe that I'd never noticed from it before,
Interesting.
but it's very clever, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey type of storytelling.
Very interesting. That's very cool to hear because I love that era. I love the Eighth Doctor because he never got nearly the laurels he deserved because he only had the one movie and the one
I know. And the one
mini
short,
episode, one short, and then he
and then a
finally got
cameo, and a cameo in The Power of the
Power of the
Doctor,
Doctor, right? The
because
most
he doesn't
recent
wear
one there.
robes.
That's right. There's always going to be one of them, as the Seventh Doctor would noted. But I actually want to say that how likely do you think it is? And I pushed this before. I feel like we could get another series of the Eighth Doctor with Russell T Davies really wanting to kind of like MCU this a little bit, little
Yep.
Star Warsy, like 'cause he has Disney Plus. Obviously, he said he wants to like make a couple more series in that world, expand on the franchise. I feel like we already have a unit series in place. I think the time is absolutely right. Paul McGann is not too old for it. We could still fit the role out. Like people complaining too much. He can get a full season that goes alongside, say, the newest Doctors. We have our specials in November. We have the newest Doctor start out. We could have a concurrent Eighth Doctor series, and I think that'd be
Oh yeah,
great.
I think that's absolutely a thing that they're gonna look into. I think especially now they're realizing how important it is to lean on the legacy of the characters that came before, not in a like pandering sort of way, but in a way that makes sense to give them love. Like the Power of the Doctor was so great, and then you look at Time Crash and you look at what the 50th probably should have had more of, frankly. As much as I
Absolutely,
love the 50th, I think the 50th is pretty much perfect, other than I do think that ultimately the classic era Doctors kind of got sidelined.
right,
Enough that they
right,
made their own short about it, you know? Like,
which is great.
yeah, the
I
Five-ish
love it.
Doctors reboot is fantastic.
Right, it is pretty
So
funny. I
it's
kind of
just one
understood
of
why they
those.
did that. I kind of understood
Oh,
why they
for
did that,
sure.
because there's just a fact of like how it was already a packed episode, as it were. But it does feel a little unfortunate that the 50th anniversary they celebrated just the last 10 years of it, basically, as it were, even less than that at that point, almost
Right.
9 years. So, but yeah, it is
But
what it is. Like,
Davies clearly wants to. Like,
right,
he's made it a point that he wants to keep expanding it. And I think that he was always trying to find the way to bridge classic Who in the right ways. And then I think Moffat really kind of knocked it out of the park in the end, finding ways to like bring back the first Doctor and finding different ways to like,
yeah,
he wrote obviously McGann's last story now. And he also wrote like the or not the Five-ish Doctors. He wrote Time Crash with the Fifth Doctor. So, Moffat does play well with those characters, and Davies
right,
was involved with at least one of those.
right. And Moffat has been rumored to be involved again with the RTD era, from I've heard a couple of episodes writing
Mhm.
here and there, which I wouldn't be surprised at all. And maybe they give him that. Maybe how awesome would it be? Yeah, Russell T Davies running the current Doctor, and maybe Moffat runs the Eighth Doctor show. You know what I mean? Kind of like you can have
God, I
both
would lose
Moffat
my
and Davies at the same
mind.
time, right?
I'd lose my
Isn't it?
mind, and I love that they want to expand it, right?
Yeah, me too.
Because unlike the thing that Liam Neeson said about Star Wars
Right.
that's gone across the internet the last few days, I just want to shout out that like I I really wish I wish I could really take Liam Neeson at his word, but he also totally just showed up in Obi-Wan and he's been in the
Right.
Clone Wars. So it's not like he hasn't even come back to the well to get a paycheck. Dude
Right.
has. and he's allowed to do whatever he wants and he can say whatever he wants. But I think that people really underestimate, like, Star Wars right now, in my mind, is some of the best it's ever been storytelling wise, because I'm getting things like Rebels. I'm getting things
Mhm.
like Andor. I'm getting Obi-Wan. I'm getting
Mhm.
Ahsoka. We're getting Mando. We're getting the movies. Star Wars right now on television and film finally feels like what I thought it could feel like back in the 90s and the 2000s with the Dark Horse comics and the
Right.
books. We're expanding, we're doing things. It's not making it less special unless the quality dips. And in my opinion, right now, Star Wars' quality really is not dipping.
Agreed, and some people will disagree with you on that. I heavily agree with you on that. I think it's been great. I mean, I don't think people remember what it was like back in the day. After Return of the Jedi, before the prequels, we were in this dead zone where nothing. I mean, a
Just
couple
books.
comics in there, the books were there, but I mean, I love books, I love comics, but there's a difference between those and seeing it on any kind of screen. Star Wars, I think, was the ones it's meant to be seen per se, and
Well,
that's not a knock on the books. I love the books.
right.
Um,
And to your point, right? I mean, and I was having this conversation the other day while I was at the bar with a couple of patrons where I'm a little trepidatious of adapting Heir to the Empire. I've said it to you in the past because
mhm,
there's a part of me that also realizes how important Heir to the Empire was for
right,
Star Wars, in that in a world without Star Wars, Heir to the Empire gave us Star
Star
Wars,
Wars.
real
Yeah,
Star Wars,
yeah.
real good Star Wars, and it pushed the franchise forward, right?
Right. Absolutely.
But in doing that, you also have to ultimately change its DNA, and I do wonder if that's gonna affect how people look at what they're doing, because Heir to the Empire is very specific to a generation of people,
Right.
and that does become the tedious thing that you mess with, right, in
It's
how
tricky.
you handle these things. That being said, I would rather they attempt to do it, and I trust Filoni enough to give him credit to do it, while
Yeah.
also knowing that I like where we're at and everything feels good, and let's keep going at the momentum we're going as long as the storytelling stays this consistent.
Agreed. I think the issue is gonna be, the MCU, for example, is a good example. They did Civil War. They did Secret Invasion. They were definitely quite different from the source material. From the comic 'cause Civil War was a comic book run, or
Yes,
event in the
7
comic books.
issues.
Secret
Yeah.
Invasion was an event, but they were both done very differently, called the same thing, but the matter of it was completely different. I kinda feel like that is what Star Wars has in mind, is to do Heir to the Empire in, like,
Its
kind
own
of Heir to
term.
the Empire, its own terms. Like, it'll be the heart of it, you'll have Thrawn involved kind of thing, but the actual meat of the story will probably be different. I think you're gonna kind of probably get Ahsoka in the Luke angle, so to speak. You're not gonna have Luke Skywalker leading this Heir to the Empire story, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't think you're gonna get Luke Han and Leia. It's gonna be Ahsoka,
I think
maybe
you're gonna
Finn.
see them.
I think you'll see them, but I don't think they're gonna be the leads, is what I'm saying. I don't think they're gonna be the
Oh,
heads of the
I don't
story.
think they're I absolutely don't think they're gonna be the leads, but I think they'll be
Right.
involved, which I think in and
100%.
of itself is another reason why I almost wish that it was animated.
Mhm. Exactly. I agree a little bit to that point too. Um, so, but I guess the question I have is, Heir to the Empire is so specifically loved by Star Wars fans. I don't know if Civil War and Secret Invasion were so loved by comic book fans that they like the comic fans didn't mind the switching. I don't know if the Star Wars fans will handle the switching quite as well.
Yeah,
From
that's
them.
exactly what I'm getting at, basically, is I don't think everyone's gonna be super cool about it, Paul.
I know that's shocking in the Star Wars world that people aren't cool with things. I
Yeah, I
will be
know.
because I'm
I'm
prepared.
as shocked as you are that I'm saying out loud that I don't think Star Wars fans may necessarily handle Heir to the Empire being changed. I'm shocked, utterly shocked right now that I could even imagine that Star Wars fans would lose their cool about something.
As a Star Wars fan, I hold that near and dear to my heart. I came to this degree a long time ago. I love what I love, and I've also decided to, if people love something that I don't like, it's okay. It's okay. They can love it, and I won't. And
Not
I don't need to
loving a
tell you
thing is
about it.
not a personality trait. I just
Yes,
need that noted. Not
yes,
loving something is not a personality trait.
absolutely.
There's a lot of that going on in multiple fandoms right now too, and it's super frustrating. Like, people wear not liking popular movies as a badge of honor,
Yes.
and I'll never understand it.
because I am unique. I am different. I am my own person. I am not following the crowd. And it's like, you know what? People, there's a crowd there for a reason. So, like,
Mhm.
you don't need to call out. And I'm not saying you have to like it. I'm not saying you have to like all these popular movies. But you know what? You don't have to say that. Don't say it. Don't talk about it. If you don't like something, don't talk about it. If somebody asks you your opinion, that's one thing. I go, hey, PJ, what do you think about this movie? Then you can go, yeah, I wasn't a big fan. That's fine. But it's different than me going, then you come up to me and go, PLD, I fucking hate this movie that you love. Fuck you. It's like,
Yeah. Although I
why?
will say Flash kind of broke me in that regard, where every time we've had a conversation, it's come up. I'm like, fuck you for liking that movie. Like,
That's true. But that's also kind of a running bit between friends. That's a different story too at this point.
yeah.
Especially because I'll
Although,
over the
who am
top.
I to talk? I fucking got it on 4K because I hate myself. And,
That was the
I,
greatest
I,
piece of ammo I ever had. I just went, wow,
I,
awesome.
yeah, but here's the thing. I admitted to it too. I didn't pretend I didn't buy it.
Yeah.
I sent it directly to you and Jeff and went, I hate myself. I immediately made it a point that I knew what I did was not in my best interest, but it's
True.
Michael Keaton's Batman. It's the last DCU movie other than Aquaman at this point. The completionist in me needed to have it in the collection.
Right.
It's
Get it.
unfortunate at times that I feel the need to do this because I also own like Dark Phoenix, and Dark
Right.
Phoenix is real bad, but
Yes, it
I
is.
own the rest of the X-Men movies, so I have to have it. And I
I
felt
get it.
really bad because when I had no intention initially of like buying it. I was gonna try so hard not to do it. And I'm at the store
Failed.
and the lady and I are walking through the aisles and we're doing our thing and we're getting the stuff we need for the house and we're walking past the end cap and it's there. Sitting there right in front of me on 4K.
Just jumped in your cart.
And I dumped it in the cart and she, and she gave me the look that she hadn't met this version of me yet, even though she's seen the collection and knows. And she's like, I thought you didn't like it. And I was like, I don't. But and I threw you under the bus. I'm gonna be honest
Did you?
about that.
Awesome.
I threw you under the bus in this, and I was like, there is gonna come a day where we're going to end up having to cover this in some capacity. And I'm not gonna want to have to go out of my way at that point to go and find it. So at least now it sits on the shelf where I can find it at all times. And I have to have it because Michael Keaton's Batman.
Now, here's a question I have to ask you. You put
Mhm.
forth that you did admit it to me and Jeff. I want to know something though. Like, if you were just to come out and clean and say you got it, I do think that is worthy of admiration. But here's the thing also. I know that you know that I have interaction with your movies anywhere. So, quite
Uh-huh.
frankly, you know that if you hadn't said anything, I was going to see that you had purchased Flash
Exactly.
anyway. So
Exactly.
let me just say, you're coming clean with Jeff and I. It's a little bit more like, I'm going to get out of this thing because it's leaked. It's going to leak already, and I'm going to get shit for it
You're
anyway.
right. Exactly. I got
So
ahead of it.
if I did not have that access, would you have still admitted it? That's
Yes,
the
I
question
absolutely would have.
Okay.
Because it's
Okay.
still me.
Okay, fair.
It's still me. Look, man, we know how this goes. We've done this song and dance before. We both know how this ends. It ends this way every single time.
He denied me my chance to screenshot it and just put it in the chat just as the screenshot with no captions.
Uh-huh. I was
Damn
not
you.
giving you ammunition. I am getting ahead of this before anyone can use this against me because for all intents and purposes, I don't like the movie. But god damn it, it has Michael Keaton as Batman and it belongs on the shelf because it is, the end of the DCEU thing as we know it.
Fair. Okay.
And I own all the other
All right.
ones. I mean, I even bought Shazam 2 and I didn't care for Shazam 2 either.
I haven't even seen Shazam 2 yet, but I will because it's in your movies anyway.
Yeah, it's there with everything else.
Well, you still got to get Blue Beetle eventually.
Well, that hasn't hit digital yet. And that's
Right.
also not the DCEU, right? As we're aware, it is the beginning of the new DC universe.
Kinda, isn't it? Like kinda, like it's like a
Yes, but that's what James Gunn
very
is saying, so we
vague.
have to
I thought
take
James Gunn
James
basically
Gunn at
said
his word.
that. I thought James Gunn said the character was going to be there. but that he was. I don't
He
think
also said
movies
it's
made
like the
Beetle
first
Mediocre.
chapter of our new DC. Like he's not involved in it, but it's like the first movie
Okay.
that he didn't oversee it, but it's the first movie now. But Zolo is going to come back as Blue Beetle in the
Well, that
universe.
that I definitely got, and I didn't quite read the other part because I thought it was pretty vague. Now, what about Aquaman? Does that like Aquaman 2? Is that
No,
part of it?
that's technically the very last DC
Okay.
EU movie, technically
Uh,
speaking.
I mean, I'm not for ever
They
shelving
made this
art.
so fucking complicated.
I just don't get it. That's something that you just dump at this point to HBO Max. Put it on HBO Max and
Here's
get rid of it. And,
here's the thing with this too, right? That is where I could see Liam Neeson saying stuff about things.
yeah.
WB has been throwing things at a wall forever, and it's just totally cratered DC as a property,
Right.
right?
Right.
They just have.
Ugh.
They
I
managed
don't.
to fuck up Michael Keaton coming up as Batman. They, I mean, like commercially, they
Okay, that's fair.
fucked it up so
That's fair.
bad that Michael Keaton's return as Batman is
Flops.
one of the biggest flops of all time in movies.
It's true.
Like, there's no
That's
world
impressive.
where nostalgia sequels exists that this makes sense.
Right.
But
Right. Absolutely.
because they've cratered the properties so bad, that's where we end up.
I feel so bad for Gunn because, like, quite frankly, they announced his taking over the DC like a year ago now, pretty much, and like
Mhm.
everything since then, like we understand that, and cinephiles understand what's going on. A lot of the casual fans see the headline James Gunn taking over, and then everything else that's happened to him has been under him as far as they're concerned. And
Mhm.
like he had nothing to do with Flash, really. He had nothing to do with Blue Beetle per se. He has nothing really to do with Aquaman. It's just he's just kind of there ushering in this. Oh, this is the last I was in there. I got to clear out the basement before I can start over, kind of thing. But it feels like he's starting behind the eight ball already, which is tough on him. I'd like to have him get actually a fresh start. I'd like to let Superman Legacy, his Superman film, be a fresh start, so to speak. Um, Speaking of Superman, real quick, have you watched the My Adventures with Superman show yet?
No, there's just too much shit these days, dude. Like,
I get
I
it.
have had no time to sit it and watch it, but I've heard it's very good.
I've watched one episode so far, and I'm all in. I think it's a different Superman. If I had to give you a pitch, it's kind of like Spider-Man meets Invincible. So far,
Interesting.
and that's only one
Okay.
episode, but it's a kind of a younger Superman. It's very bright, very fun. I'm enjoying it. I can't wait to go on and continue it. But yeah, so that's bright at least.
Well, I'll
But
have
go
to check that out eventually because it's been on my list of things to get to.
right.
I
Only 10
just
episodes,
haven't
20 minutes.
done it yet.
So one of the reasons I got to it. 10 minutes or 10 episodes, 20 minutes each or whatever. I'll get there. Me and my son, that's one of the things I put forth for my son and myself to watch together as we also go through the 1990s Spider-Man series right now. So got all my
I
animated
still
series right now.
contend that 90s series is kind of the basis of what Feige's been doing with the MCU. Like, it has so many similarities of the world building and things like that.
Right.
Except
Yeah.
instead of it being Spider-Man, it was Iron Man who was like
Right.
the character who
Keystone.
kind of briefed, like
Yeah.
was the key center part of it. But like that very first episode, you hear Spider-Man talking about the Avengers and Hulk and
Yep.
trying to join them and stuff, and you're like, oh, I
Oh,
totally see where Feige was
right.
going with all of this. Like
Established
he was
universe.
clearly,
Yeah.
and he was clearly a fan,
Yeah.
which I get.
Absolutely, absolutely. I do find it funny that one of the funniest things about it, they have these like weird, like they had to censor themselves in weird ways. My son was telling me about this. I didn't actually know much about this, but they had to censor themselves in weird ways. Like the blood was different colored. But the weirdest one
Mhm.
they censored, the weirdest thing they had to censor, they couldn't call them the Sinister Six. They had
Yeah,
to call them the Insidious Six. Like,
it's
what is the
so weird.
difference? Like, I don't understand what the difference is. They both basically mean the same thing. They're both movies in the James Wan franchise. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either. But I mean, it's the same world where both that and Batman the animated series couldn't use bullets against the
Yeah,
villain or against the heroes. So they were like,
true.
all right, lasers it is. And you're like, is that
What?
really different?
Right. No,
But
I guess
you know,
more fictional. I don't
you
know. I
know,
don't know.
I really love that there was an era of pop culture in the late 80s and the early 90s where you could make Rambo and RoboCop and the Toxic Avenger and all these Starship Troopers, all these like hard R-rated action films
To
or
Saturday morning
horror
cartoons.
films, and then turn them into Saturday morning cartoons for children.
Yeah, I love it.
And I miss that because there's a world where Friday the 13th should have been an animated series. And coming off Friday the 13th Part 3 in 1982, Jason not having an animated series once he dons the hockey mask just feels fucking criminal.
You know, honestly speaking, like I don't know if I'm quite on board with the '80s thing, '80s bit of like Friday the 13th, because I don't know how you make that into it. I mean, they did make Rambo, they did make Toxic Avenger. I feel like, what do you make Jason a lovely? I don't know how you do it. But now that you mention it, though, why isn't there a Friday the 13th animated series now?
Right.
Like,
But
I feel
my
like they
point
could
is,
do a lot of them now. Our Friday the 13th, our Nightmare on Elm Street. Robert Englund may not be able to do Freddy in live action anymore, but he could sure definitely voice the hell out of it in an animated show.
I'm just saying, if Toxie can have his own show where it's Toxie and the Avengers, like the fact that the Toxic Crusaders were a thing and Jason didn't get his own Saturday morning cartoon where, you know, Jason is just protecting Crystal Lake, as it turns out. Like, you could have turned it into a total environmental thing. You could have made him Captain fucking Planet if you had wanted to. How
That's
did
a
we
crossover we
miss
didn't
the
know.
boat on this?
Captain Planet, Jason crossover. I love it. I love it. Maybe that's
Am
what
I
they should do.
wrong?
I don't know. I don't know. Absolutely.
I mean, imagine that. Imagine a Friday the 13th show cartoon for kids where it's like Jason battling against people who are like polluting Crystal Lake or things of that nature. I would have
We could
watched the shit out of that as a child.
let's go further. Let's make Halloween supernatural. Let's say that Halloween, Michael didn't actually kill his sister. His sister got whisked away to another dimension, and he has to find his sister. That's why he keeps coming back on Halloween. He keeps hoping that the portal is going to open up again, and he can find his sister.
Oh my god, I would watch the hell out of that.
Absolutely,
That would have been
right?
the best Saturday morning cartoon ever.
Jason and Michael together. I mean, as a back-to-back show.
Yeah. Oh my god. And then you have Loomis actually realizing the truth, and it's actually like a buddy comedy with Michael and Dr. Loomis.
Yes. Loomis has to
I would
protect
totally watch
Michael.
that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I
Oh
love
my
it. He
god, someone in
understands.
Hollywood, give us money because you're not doing anything else with it right now anyway. Like, let us do this.
Yes, develop it, everything else. Perfect. I love it. Let's do it.
Look, there's clearly plenty of money in the streaming services. He says awkwardly before he starts laughing, knowing that no one's making money doing that thing. Yeah.
Pay your
It's
writers, pay your actors.
sad state of affairs out there. Going on into 5 months now.
Wonderful.
Hey, Hollywood, get it the fuck together.
Seriously.
Like, not hard. Pay the people outside on the picket lines. Really not hard.
No, not hard at all. Especially when the more comes out that like these people haven't got a damn cent for their streaming. Like, not a cent. The fact that Eric Kripke hasn't gotten a cent from Supernatural.
Yeah.
Which is like the
Or what about Aaron Paul talking about with Breaking Bad? He's seen no money since it hit Netflix, and people forget Breaking Bad was almost canceled until it hit Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
El Camino was a Netflix original movie before it went to AMC.
Right, exactly.
And yet he's not seeing money for it. And I'm not sitting here saying like
boo-hoo for them.
Boo-hoo, like, I know that Aaron Paul has money, but that's not the point. Right. The thing also is, if Aaron Paul's not making money, guess who else is not making money? Literally everyone else that was involved in that.
Thug number one, Curse number 3.
Yeah, Doctor like everyone who is, you know, trying to make a living off of residuals, they're not making money off of residuals. That's a bad fucking thing. Like, people should be making money for the work that they did, and they're not seeing money for it. I don't know, man. If I was doing shit and not getting paid for it, I'd be pissed too.
You were at one point. I remember that.
Oh, yeah, huh? Funny. Ha. That doesn't hurt. Burns. Ow. Wow. Yeah. I do miss our show sometimes, though.
I do too. I always do. I'm not gonna lie. Pay your writers, pay your actors. Let's get this shit done. I will say, I did find it kind of comforting to a degree that the directors are starting to turn on themselves, or not the directors. I'm sorry, the studio heads are starting to turn on themselves a little bit. The leaks coming out that they're kind of pissing each other off and saying, "Well, pointing fingers now." And I gotta feel like when they start eating their own, that's got to be moving the right direction.
I'm always here for a little bit of the eating their own, if you
Yeah,
will. You
there we
know,
go.
like it's more than time.
100%, 100%. Well, all right. Now we talked enough. Now can we get into Friday the 13th? Are you happy?
I already did. I tried to pivot and you just kept going. To be
That's
fair,
true.
I
That's
tried
true.
to pivot it. I even specifically was like, after 1982's Friday the 13th Part 3, where Jason gets the mask, I tried. I pivoted. I was the adult
No,
in the room this time.
it was my turn to derail. God damn it! Every once in a while, I got to be youngster. I'm too old. I got to have my
You
young
haven't been young since 1970.
Since 1982, when Friday the 13th Part 3 comes out.
That's okay. All right. So Stephen Miner came back to direct PLD's life in 1982 with Friday the 13th Part 3. Stephen Miner, of course, had directed Friday the 13th Part 2 just the year before, and they were very quick to move on another film in the franchise because, Friday the 13th movies at this point were still printing money. But the
Yes.
one thing Steve Miner wanted to make sure if he was doing is he was going to do it with a point. And that point was at the audience's eyes, 3D, because the 3D revolution had once again begun because history repeats itself, James Cameron. 3D had once again kind of hit the stage and people were kind of digging it. So he was like, you know what, man? Those 3D horror films from the 50s were some of my favorites, and I would like to do that.
Right. And I
And
want
so
to make
that's what he
clear.
did.
I want to make clear about this kind of thing is I think 3D. I don't know if like youngsters. This is me being the old man of the room again. I don't know if youngsters understand the difference between 3D like now and 3D. What they meant by 3D back then, because 3D now, like the films that are in 3D, it just basically means you
It
put on these
opens the box.
glasses, it opens a box, and you can see depth and everything else. It's just kind of there the entire time. That's not what 3D was back in the day. Like 1980,
3D was meant to be a
1952.
gimmick.
It's a gimmick. They had to actually specifically shoot shots, and they took a long time to shoot. And something would come out of the screen at you, which is perfect for a horror movie. Let's be honest; it's a perfect thing for a horror movie. But the whole rest of the film wasn't in 3D per se. So it is a gimmick, and I do feel like sometimes, including this film, it does take away because sometimes it's like so obvious what they're doing, and sometimes like
Yes.
it feels like I'm not writing a story. I am writing set pieces and I'm writing 3D pieces, and I'm going to write the story around those 3D pieces to make it work. And
Well, I
so I
mean,
didn't
the
see that.
actors basically said as much.
Yeah,
There was only one take of every scene that they ever shot in 3D because they didn't have the money for doing
right,
anything else because shooting in 3D was expensive
right,
and they had to get the shot right. So it
right.
didn't matter if actors were flubbing their lines or anything. It was just about the shot.
Absolutely. Which is to the film's detriment, I think. I think that's one of the things. I will say this film, I didn't like it a lot when I first saw it a couple of times. I've warmed up to it a lot, but there's some things I really like and some things I really don't like um, in this film.
I think I had this kind of come to God moment with the movie last night and this
Oh,
morning
good.
while I was
Okay.
watching it. Because similarly, I've always had this one lower ranked for a lot of reasons. I've never thought it was like the best Friday movie. In fact, I was always kind of dogging on it
Yeah.
because I don't necessarily like most of the characters. I don't necessarily like a lot of it, but I kind of realized this actually has arguably the best third act in some of the early films. And not just that, it's got peak Jason. Like, if
Yes.
you're looking for what you love about Jason as a character, I prefer Baghead Jason in a lot of ways, as we talked about in the last episode. Like, I
Right.
just love that version of the character. I like that very like scary, animalistic human version of him that's strong and hulking, but like more of a shadowy character who you don't see, you don't really feel his presence until he's there, and then it's kind of violent and just very, very creepy and scary in a real world scenario.
Right.
This Jason is not. This is the Jason that we all come to love, who is kind of hiding in the shadows, and you always see him. The score is amped up. So every time he's even like in a frame, you hear that like
Right.
they really start to build it. They build the kills, they build everything around. This is what you know Jason to be. And
Right.
that includes, of course, donning the hockey mask.
Absolutely. And I too agree 100%. And this is where we differed. Like, this film actually made me like Baghead Jason even less. We definitely differ on this. I've never liked Big Baghead Jason. He is my least favorite Jason.
I know I have to respect your opinion, but you're wrong. And that's fine, but you're wrong.
That's okay for you to be wrong, because you're wrong
You know
about me
what it
being
is?
wrong, but it's okay.
Truthfully, I think I just love the Derek Mears version of it so much. It's also played a part in how much I really like the character of
That's
Baghead Jason.
that's an interesting That's interesting. I mean, I'm gonna go through this again. I was slow to like Derek Mears. The first time I saw, I wasn't a huge fan. It kind of took me out. Then when I rewatched 2009 after watching all the other ones, I loved it a lot more. And Derek Mears is now one of my favorite Jasons. I'm actually gonna do this because I have never sat back and gone, "Who's my favorite Jason?" You talk about that a lot. A lot of people I talk to have talked about it. I'm always like, I don't know. I kind
Yeah.
of haven't really thought about it per se. So I'm actively watching these films, and going, which is my favorite Jason so far? Jason 3 is way up here, and Jason 2 is way down there. And it's fine. I get why you like it, but for every reason you like it is every reason I don't like it. To me, I don't.
Because
I
you like
want my Jason.
Supernatural Jason.
I do, and I want Jason to be
Yeah.
intimidated. And Jason 2 isn't intimidating to me. Like I said, he felt like a reject from The Hills Have Eyes to me. That's what it
That's
felt
exactly why he's scary to me, though.
like.
Because
And that's funny. That's why it doesn't work for me. It's not
I don't know,
exciting.
like it's just so real to me. I don't. I know how you feel. I just get like it's weird to me because I think that the reasons for liking it and you not for me is so weird because it feels like the kind of thing that for me knowing you feels like it should be connecting, and it's so weird to me that it doesn't.
I
Like
feel
it's such
exactly
a
the same
weird
way.
disconnect. Yeah,
I feel
like
exactly
it's
the
a
same. I'm like,
weird
what?
disconnect I can't get past where I'm like, PLD, I know that you like you should like this. I don't understand. Like real world Jason is very cool.
And I feel exactly the same way. I'm like, this isn't Jason. This is a different movie without Supernatural
I
Jason.
know.
It's not the same thing. So how can you? I don't get it. I don't get it, PJ. That's okay. No,
Damn it, Paul.
get it, PJ. But that is one of the reasons why I do like this one a lot more. Is like that's what I've come to decide. Jason really makes it. I don't like any of these characters either. Really, honestly, the only two characters I actually really like. And like is a strong word. Is I like the couple at the beginning of the film, like the general store owners.
Yeah.
Those kind of characters I kind of
Yeah.
dig. I like to see more of them. Look, the people at the camp themselves.
Harold!
I'm here on my spirit animal. He's eating the food. He's getting yelled at for eating too much food. So
I just
he's
can't
got the
get over
buddy.
that.
Like,
Yeah, I love Harold. Poor Edna's entire dialogue is just Harold, where are you?
nagging
And
him
it's
left
like
and
a
right.
bad Ma, Pa, and Kettle sketch.
I think I like it even more that like it's the first time we really see like people away from the camp, like in the real world, outside of the camp and camp counselors that like get like taken like that. I
Well,
think, am I right? Like,
no, you are. And what's funny about that to me, to your point, is that the original version of this movie would have been even more of that because they were
yeah,
straight
let's
up
talk
just
about
going to
this.
rip off Halloween 2 because the original idea for the sequel to this would have followed Amy Steele as Ginny in the mental institution and Jason tracking her down and coming after her. And
Getting revenge.
I actually kind of wish that that movie had happened because I actually think it would have pushed the series forward and out of its comfort zone of always needing to be at Crystal Lake.
That's an interesting point, and I tend to agree and disagree at the same time. And here's the disagree part, though. Havers favorably the fact that we saw Halloween 2 already, and we didn't like Halloween 2. Now, could it have been differently?
Halloween 2 is
Absolutely.
not good. We're aware.
But I guess that's a way I think about too, like how bad. Like, I know we went over this before, how like Cunningham and his people basically went forth to make Friday the 13th Part 1, saying, "Well, Halloween made money, let's rip that off." That's what they do.
Right.
That's how Friday the 13th came to be. It's almost like they went back to the well, like, well, Friday the 13th Part 2 is fine, but Halloween 2 just came out, so let's rip that one off. And I feel like that's the way it started. They actually could have this way. They actually could, because there's no way Friday the 13th was ever going to beat Halloween as far as the original film goes, because John Carpenter's John Carpenter.
John Carpenter.
Right. But they could have beaten Halloween 2 with that. That's why I kind of like that too, because Friday the 13th is a little tired because it's like the third story in a row. It just camp counselors, camp Jason, and like gets a little repetitive to a degree. You have to find a way to spark it. That does spark it. That would have sparked it. I'm very interested to see. Unfortunately, it doesn't come to be because mainly from what I gathered is Ginny didn't want to come back. Amy Seal thought she was going to get bigger and better things. She never did, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, it's weird too because every time you read anything about what kind of happened there, the story always changes. Her agents told her not to do it. Oh, well, I thought I had time or no time to do it because I thought I had booked other things, but I hadn't actually booked anything. Well, wait a second. How do you
think
think
you
you
was
don't? Yeah,
right.
and it's just kind of a bummer because I actually love that character. And I
Yeah, me
really
too.
like her. I think she's great in it. So the fact that we don't get any more with her, and then even similarly, when you look at what happens with Chris in this movie, Dana Kimmel similarly does not come back.
Right, right. Although, quite frankly, I might be the minority here. I've read people who love Chris. I'm not a fan of Chris. I don't like Chris's I don't like her performance. Really, I don't like her story nearly as much. There's a lot of
I
weirdness
like
going
her
on with her.
I like her story. My only thing is it feels a little too been there, done that of the Laurie Strode,
Yeah,
and feels specifically like they're also kind of ripping it off
yeah,
by Halloween 2 standards.
right.
Like,
That's
the
true.
traumatized and the thing is I actually had a moment where I didn't realize I've seen this movie 100 times,
Hmm.
easy.
Right.
I never really thought about the fact that they kinda set it up this idea that Chris was a former camp counselor of some sort, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, and you then I started to go, "Wait a second, did I miss something?" And then you're like, "Oh, wait, no, that's not how it plays out at all. It's
Right.
just that X thing is she has a history because sometime in the last year, Jason attacked her."
And
And that's a
I
weird thing to do off
hate
screen.
I hate that for exactly that reason. Not only is it a weird thing to do off screen, it obviously took place before Friday the 13th Part 2, because Friday the 13th Part 2 is a day before. Um,
Right.
and so you're telling me like that weakens Friday the 13th Part 2 for me because like I feel like that's supposed to be Jason's first appearance. Like Jason, like I mean, obviously I know it was 5 months previous to that he went and killed the first final girl. I'm blanking on her name from one. The what's her name? Friday the 13th Part 1, the final girl, the Annie. Annie? I can't remember. Why can't I remember that name?
Yes. Yes.
Annie. Okay, I'm just blank. I'm getting old. So I know he kills her, but then like I feel like Friday the 13th Part 2 is supposed to be his debut. So you're telling me there's somewhere in between that he attacks Chris. And then I hate the fact that they leave this thing open. I know they even mentioned it in the documentary that there was some intention of making Jason like having sexually assaulted her. And like Chris
Mhm.
fought against the actress fought against it, and thank God she did, because that I mean, but
Mhm.
it's still even out there because here we go, we have him chasing her down. She kicks the like weapon out of his hand, and then he gets her down again, and then she supposedly goes unconscious and wakes up in bed. If this is Jason, how is she still alive? How is she still alive? Jason just left her there because she was unconscious? Like she fainted, and Jason's like, all right, you got away from me this time, but next time, like, it cheapens almost everything about the story for me. Like, so I hated everything about this
It's
movie.
a very weird choice, to say the least. And it's weird too because then Halloween 100% leans in on a very similar thing by the time you get
Mm.
to part 6, which is also problematic, which we talked about
Yep, yep, very
in the
much so,
same
actually.
regard.
Right,
And it's just kind of funny now in hindsight seeing how much these 2 things continue to circle each other as franchises. Like Halloween
right.
and Friday are almost too like intrinsically tied in
Mm.
such weird ways, including
Yeah,
doing that with those characters. And
right,
thank God Friday the 13th ultimately had the good sense of being like, "You know what? I think Jason being that guy is actually way more detrimental. Like, don't go near that.
right.
Like,
No, it's bad for
do not start bringing any sort of like sexual assault thing into your horror stuff. Like,
right,
there's just something already horror movies technically should feel like an escape.
Right.
Like, a good slasher film should be an escape, not a morality play that's also gonna make you ultra uncomfortable.
Right.
I say that knowing that the Saw franchise exists, but, like, ultimately, you and I go to watch a Friday the 13th film, and I would guess most of the audience as well, because they just wanna see Jason kill a bunch of teenagers. The
Right.
moment that you cross the line and you start to do, like, "Oh, but Jason might have actually been, like, a rapist killer," that is no longer fun.
Right. Agreed.
Like, that's a
And
real world thing that is not fun, and we should not be touching on that as, like, a thing for a character like that.
well, and something we're going to get into eventually because we will do this series. We're definitely going to do this series next. Our next big series, which will probably take place a year from now, is Nightmare on Elm Street, and that's Freddy is
Mhm.
far more sexually based in a way, but they are also, with the exception of 2010, and it's one of the reasons 2010 is as reviled as it is. I think they let it kind of hang out there and let you kind of imply it without ever getting overt about it at all. It's never overt. He's a child murderer, not a child molester, but it's kind of thrown in, like it's kind of like dangling there. If you feel like that makes it better for his motivations, you could see that, but you don't have to. You can kind of like disagree. Like, but 2010, they decided to like make that this is the overt thing. Oh no, they actually made it part of the storyline, or he was like
Right.
actually living less than. And that's one of the reasons why I think 2010 failed because we're just so out of the realm of what they were trying to make a nightmare for. But even Nightmare, I don't think like the original Nightmare series, I would say, wouldn't have gone this route with Freddy. And Freddy is probably the most sadistic of the three. When you think about it, Michael's kind of he's got a little bit of an innocent evil going on. I say innocent evil like that's such a weird saying, but he's still kind of like a kid. But Jason's even more of a kid. He's actually, if anybody's a hero of the three, it's Jason. He's the guy who just he's fucked up. He got fucked up, and he had a fucked up
Again,
childhood.
hence why I think he'd make a great Saturday morning cartoon
True.
fighting against people who are polluting the environment.
Right, absolutely. Um,
I
exactly.
don't know, man. I just get in this weird space where the moment you start to cross those lines, it's like it's why I don't ever watch stuff like The Last House on the Left. I
Right.
just find in general, I don't think rape in storytelling is always a good thing, period. I think
Very
you're
rarely.
opening up wounds for real trauma and you're starting to mess with stuff you shouldn't be messing with. And
Right.
so when you try to link it into your horror films, it becomes an entire another thing that is
Right.
wildly uncomfortable in a
Right.
really bad way. And I think that the moment that you start to dangle that and like link it into your potential characters, you've gone too far. So I'm glad that Friday the 13th in 1982 had the good sense to be like, actually, we will not let Jason cross that line. And they've never gone across that line
Again.
since with it.
No. Thank God for Chris, the actress who plays Chris, because that was all Chris fighting back on that Vera. Or, I'm sorry, Vera, not Dana Kimmel. Good for
Yeah.
her. Friday does get close once though. We get to part 9. There's like worms in the butt and everything else, and that's a different story entirely. But
Well,
we'll
okay.
get
That Friday 9 is
totally
a
different
movie
story.
that exists and is made by someone who doesn't actually like the Friday the 13th movies. So
I
there's
am. I
that.
will say. I have to say real quick. We're gonna get there. I know, and we're gonna get to 9. But like, as much as that film, like what that film did to me, I am fascinated by the director himself. He is a fascinating like character. Like he's a character. He's almost like a character in a movie by himself. And I
Yeah.
can't wait to see that documentary that comes out because the dude is passionate. The dude is fiery, and he's committed to everything he wants to do, even if it's not good. And
Yeah.
I gotta like that passion. I gotta say, I gotta enjoy his
Yeah,
passion.
credit where credit's due. He actually gave a shit about the thing he was doing. He may not
Right.
like Friday the 13th, but he was doing it. But I get real Halloween 5 vibes from that also. This script
Oh,
is trash.
right.
What?
What? Okay.
Yeah,
That's
wait,
trash, I
what?
guess.
Oh, you're telling me Michael now lives in a gothic mansion? What?
Hmm, okay. Okay now.
Okay, yeah. Halloween 5 is a movie that still exists to this day, and if you haven't, we did talk about it. You can go listen.
You kind of go listen. It's one of our definitely one of the times we chose to skewer a little bit. We try to stay positive in all our films. We enjoy talking
I
positively.
woke up that morning and chose all the violence.
Yes, indeed, you did. Not quite as
Indeed,
violent
I did.
as say Halloween Resurrection, but
No, Halloween Resurrection just makes me sad.
yeah, it's
Just
that all.
straight up sad.
So
So to your
this one
point
does not
though,
make me sad. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, to your point, right, in all of this, what's interesting about them being in this, what is it, the Higgins Haven thing,
Yeah,
is that it's very clearly still Crystal Lake, but
right.
you're in, like, the residential area or a
Area.
private area of people who have money and
Right.
are still pretending that this stuff doesn't happen. But I kinda love that this opening kill thing is following 2 characters who are just, like, white collar farmer types who live in the area. And it
Yes.
actually adds a real sense of kind of foreboding that Jason's now leaving just the cabin area and anyone is fair game.
Absolutely, and that's what I think is good about it too. These guys are not kids. These are not like counselors at all. These guys are just adults living their lives outside the borders of Camp Crystal Lake, as far as we know, or at least on the outskirts. And he's there. I'm not even sure why he necessarily is there because it's kind of weird to think about it. He leaves Friday the 13th Part Two. We had the dream sequence, so his last we actually really know is that he was in the cabin. I think it's the last thing we actually really know because everything after that seems like it could possibly be a dream sequence. So he gets up. Does he wander there to get new clothes, and that's why? Is it a place he just knows? Maybe that's where he gets his food, because he just goes right back to the lake after that. So I don't know what it is here. I guess that might be. I could just answer my own question. I got to feel like that's the place where he goes and gets stuff sometimes, but for whatever
Mhm.
reason, usually leaves them be. But because he's so amped up after Ginny fucked around his mother and everything else, that he decides to take care of business while he's there as well.
Yeah, and I do love that this is where he ends up getting his, like, iconic look, if you will, of the jeans and the green shirt. Like, this is where that
Mm.
starts because he gets that from the store. And the other
Uh,
thing I like about this movie is that this is where we start to see Jason more as a like cloaked and shadowed figure who is
mhm.
always around. You see a lot of him like silhouette in the backgrounds of scenes when
Yep.
people are having conversations, or you see the shots of him like where we have a camera behind him and people are talking, but
Right.
you see him watching the conversation. Like there's a
Right.
lot of work being done to make Jason actually feel like a formidable predator who is hunting people
Agreed.
and is like very smart. And that's interesting to me because a lot of the times it feels like Jason's played as a very dumb character, but Friday Part 3 specifically, and I think it's because of how Richard Brooker is playing him, there's a real sense of like thinking and tacticianing type
Mhm.
going on with Jason where everything he's doing seems very pointed and very specific and he's going to do what he's going to do and like he's thought it through. He's not
Right.
just doing it because he can. He's doing it because he has to.
Absolutely. I agree 100% on that. Two things I want to say about the beginning of the film. One thing we kind of skipped over as we jumped through things. First of all, the opening credits are awesome. The disco version of the song is gets better every time I hear it. Like I remember
Oh my
hating the
god, it's
disco
so
version
good.
song. I hated it the first time I heard it. I was like, "What the fuck is this? I don't want the like." I didn't understand what was going on with it. I was like, "Where's my horror score? We're using disco now. Fuck this." Now every time I watch it, I just love it more and more. It's so good. It's so
It's
awesome.
so good. It's an absolute banger of a
Yeah.
theme. I love what Harry Manfredini did with it. I think it's so fun and just kind of wild and weird and perfect. And
It's so
especially
good.
for it to be in 1982 and be like, "Fuck it. We're putting disco in a Friday the 13th movie." And you're like, "I'm sorry. You're doing
What?
what now?" Yeah, and yet it works.
It does. It absolutely does. A second question. I do have a question with Harold and Maude, basically. Um,
Yeah,
did
yeah,
we
Mom Hot Kettle. Yes, correct. Continue.
did we need the poop sounds?
No.
You get Harold runs. Like I didn't understand exactly what's going on. Harold sees the snake and then just like runs past his wife. And then he goes into the bathroom. I thought he was going to get like something to kill the snake or something. That was in the bunny pit or whatever. But no, I guess he got so scared he got to shit himself. I guess I
Yeah.
don't know. Next thing he runs the thing, and then next time we see him, he's on the toilet, and we just hear him plop plop. I'm like, do we really do this right now? Is this necessary? No, it's not.
That's a weird choice, to be honest with you.
Like, was it supposed to be funny? I don't know. Maybe it was supposed to be funny, but I was kind of like, uh,
And
next,
I mean,
please.
therein lies a lot of the problem with this movie,
Mm,
frankly speaking. There's a lot of that weird humor and stuff. Like, I'm just gonna say it right now. And this, Larry Zerner seems like the world's nicest dude. He really does. But Shelley is arguably the worst character in the entire franchise. And everything about his character is really frustrating because everything about him is him punching down on his own looks and punching down on like being a nerd and punching down on not being likable. And it's just fucking exhausting.
It's
And it
tiring.
happens throughout the entire fucking movie.
Right.
Like
I agree.
his first joke, he's like, just be yourself. And he goes, well, would you be yourself if you looked like me? And you're like, come on, man. Like, fucking stop.
Right, absolutely. It's very 80s. It's very 80s. I will say I agree. I love Larry Zerner. Like he actually has a very big passion for the series. He'll come to conventions. He's like a big shot lawyer now. He always like updates us on what's going on with the rights of the franchise and everything else. He's like, and he appears in the Crystal Lake Memories. He's such a good natured guy. I love this dude. But yeah, I totally get what you mean. I've come to like Shelley a little bit more, I think, because of seeing Larry Zerner so much. And I don't know. I think there's worse characters, but as of right now, he's the worst character so far. I'll give you that, especially because
I just really hate the character. I just genuinely hate him.
the girl he gets like paired with like lets him down or like turns him down, but she's not like a super bitch about it or anything. It's actually very super sweet about it. Super nice. She's like very nice to him. Like if she was like say the girl from Seven, like the blonde from Seven who
Yeah.
always like if she's bitchy like that or like you're like then you might feel a little worse for Shelly. But like this, you're kind of like, no, Shelly, you're the problem. You're the incel. You're being a dick right now.
Yeah,
So
he's
I
just awful.
yeah,
And,
agreed.
here's like the writing in this movie is a little weird because I find most of the characters also terribly interchangeable. I really can't tell you the difference between Debbie and Vera and Chris, other than Chris has more of a backstory than the others.
That's
But
really it.
they're all just too interchangeable.
We have the two potheads, and that is the crux of their existence. Like there's
Yes,
nothing.
Chuck and Chili.
I don't even remember their names. I don't care because all they do is like they smoke pot and laugh about it, and then they get killed. That's really all they do. And by the way, I will say also the male Chuck or whatever, he gives me this vibe of I am the 28 or 25-year-old, 26-year-old guy who's still hanging out with his high school seniors. Because how
Yes.
old is this dude compared to everybody else? Everybody else like these teenagers, like high school, like seniors. He's like this older guy. Who is
He
this guy
definitely
hanging out with?
feels very out of place.
Right?
He feels very much like dude who has not let go of the past, and you're like, please move on. It's really creepy you're hanging out with teenagers when you should be, not here.
He's Matthew McConaughey from Dazed and Confused, and it's
Or
like
Wyatt Russell from Everybody Wants Some.
there you go. That exactly the same thing. So it's just weird, and I don't like them at all. They're just exist like these characters. Many of them exist just to be Jason fodder. That's part of and parcel for the movies. But these guys are
Yeah.
specifically like nothing but Jason fodder.
Well, again, I feel like they really want to make Chris and Rick like a thing and really push their story. But the problem is that in order to push the story forward with them, you also need other characters to actually give a shit about. But instead, they bring in Fox, Loco, and Ollie
The
or
gang.
Allie. Yeah, and you're just like, wait a second, like why is there's now a bike gang in the middle of the movie that you're trying? I like the characters, but you don't need them here. In the same way that Renfield this year doesn't need the weird mob stuff in a movie with Nicolas Cage as fucking Dracula.
Well, the biker gang is definitely a dichotomy because it's kind of it feels out of place that the bikers are around this area because it feels like such a different area that a biker gang wouldn't be in potentially. Yes. But I do like the fact that again, at least it's outside people. It's not like we're not tied down to just these campers and counselors at this lake. You get a little bit more outside people, which I do like a little bit. At the same time, though, going back to the other part of the story, is we have the potheads who are just Jason fodder. It is the one reason I don't mind Shelley as much. At least Shelley has some kind of identity. It's not a good identity, but it's at least some kind of thing that stands out. You remember Shelley, who Shelley is, because Shelley is that kind of guy. So love him or hate him, you remember him at least, which makes he's at least a drawn out character. The problem is when you want Chris and Rick to be your people, you got to make them likable. And Rick is not likable. He's a big douche canoe. Like nothing about him screams like you're supposed to want to root for him, but he does nothing to make you want to root for him. Chris, you feel sorry for partially, but you're still kind of like, I don't know if I really like her either. She's not the most likable person either. So like it ends up you start rooting against your main characters. That's not good. That's not a good thing.
I mean, I'll say this. It's very obvious to me that one thing that the Friday franchise became very, well known for is the fact that they just write one-dimensional teen characters that are made to be fodder for Jason.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that as a conceit. I love it as a thing that the franchise has become known for in some capacity because it's true. That's what they're known. That's what it is. Like we know what these movies are. It's Jason goes into the woods and kills teenagers. That's why we like them. But like Friday 4, 5, and 6 all have one character who is interlinked in all of them, and he's a character we actually like.
Right.
So that is part of why the movies continue to push forward and are actually good and interesting, and they're the reason I go back to those ones so much. And I say that about 5, which people are so hard on all the time.
I have
for reasons.
5.
So. Yeah.
Beyond
but
4 and 6 I'm all on, just so you know.
Yeah, and I think we can say we all feel that way about that one if you know the movies. Like Friday 4 and 5 or 4 and 6 are frequently among the top 4 movies in the franchise, I would say, when you're talking to just about anyone. Like anyone who loves these movies is probably going to say that they have a big love for those movies. Just 100%. Is because
100%.
We like them. Those ones are good. They speak to us, whatever. That's great. And I love that they do. And I love that we have them. But it also makes the glaring problems in, say, this movie more specific and weird to me, because if I don't have someone to latch onto that I care about, I'm not going to necessarily love the movie as much because I'm more just kind of bored waiting for Jason to kill you. Now, that said, I like Chris more than you do, I think.
Yeah.
As a character. I think that Dana Kimmel's very good at what she's trying to do, and I think that's specifically because I think the third act is so strong. I think that the whole sequence of her running through the cabin and she's like the wind is blowing the windows open and she's slamming the doors, and she's so good at playing that final girl panic in that feel, and yet at the same time I don't feel like we really get anywhere with her and what happened with her and Jason. Like we really don't push it forward in any meaningful way that matters, which is super frustrating. Like I like the character, I like what you're doing with her, but you ultimately kind of let her down because nothing comes of it.
And maybe I would like her more if it did. Maybe that's part of my reason why. I mean, I'm looking at the whole story, and then Chris never gets fully into it for me. I never get fully into her. Maybe that's the reason why. Maybe if she had that kind of finish, the rest would make sense to me. Because she doesn't, it doesn't work. I just feel like she's a retread at this point. And I've seen it before, and I've seen it done better by Ginny. I think Ginny's a far better, stronger character. I think Annie's a far better, stronger character. And Chris just, I don't know. I just don't really enjoy her. I wish I did. I really do.
No, it's fair. I mean, I wish I liked Shelley more, but and that's just because Larry Zerner seems like a cool dude and I want to have a beer with him. But
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, I can't really lean on that. And it's funny because after I watch the movie, every time I go back and I watch the part from Crystal Lake Memories, where
me too.
that corresponds with the movie, because if you guys have never seen Crystal Lake Memories, it covers all of the movies, and it's like an 8-hour documentary. It's awesome.
Great. Also made one for Nightmare as well. Very good.
Yeah. Never Sleep Again.
Yep. Similar fashion, everything else, but the deep dives, the people involved, actors, directors, like stunts, people, everybody involved with the movie, did interviews with. They talk about development. They talk about what happened on scene. It's great. And Larry's in there
it's
talking
fantastic. Yeah, and the thing I also learned was like Dana Kimmel is equally as super cool.
Yeah, I love Dana Kimmel's in her interviews. Absolutely.
I
Uh,
honestly think there's a world, and we've talked about this in the past, but to get her and then you get Amy Steele back, if the rights weren't so screwed up, man, there's a world where a perfect legacy sequel exists where Jason goes hunting the final girls and the final girls like stand their ground. And I would
right.
love to see one like that because they've flirted with it in other mediums of storytelling. I talked about like a bunch of the final girls and guys are in the second Freddy versus Jason comic.
Right. Right.
Some of the books have kind of messed with those ideas. Like there's a world where you could do that. The legacy sequel to Friday the 13th perfectly exists because the final girl's still alive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Amy could come back and no problem. Chris could come back. Absolutely. Hopefully do something more with her head. She could actually improve potentially. I'm glad Rick's not coming back though, because I just felt Rick was a douche the whole time and had no redeeming qualities at all. He was an asshole. He was arrogant and like did nothing for me. I was
No,
glad when
that's
he died.
fair. One thing I want to say though is I think that Friday Part 3 starts the absolute great trend of Friday movies having just the most insane kills. Friday 1 kinda does, obviously, as we talked about with the arrow through the neck thing, and Friday 2 has a couple of good ones, but every death in this movie is very memorable when you see it happen. And that is where they really start to push Jason into doing much more grisly sort of things with him like the grabbing Rick's head and pushing it in until one of his eyes pops out, right?
That's
Or
a
the
perfect 3D thing for me, by the way. That was a
yes,
perfect use of 3D for a horror film. That's the one to go. And Rick's death is probably my favorite death of well, one of two deaths.
I mean Vera's death is great too with the spear gun,
The harpoon spear gun thing. That's
the
the thing.
harpoon. Yeah.
It's funny. That was one of the ones that like it bothers me just a smidge in terms because I feel like I don't love the fact that Jason does a long distance death like that. It seems very out of character for Jason. He always like to be up close and taking care of it. And it
Mm,
was obviously this is obviously more of a 3D setup. Like we could have him kill him with a spear gun and you could have the 3D work. And so that's why instead of it being a kill invented for the movie, like for kill's sake, but it's done well. So I do appreciate it.
well, but also I would say for better or worse because of your point, they've definitely made it in later that Jason does use arrows and things like
Yeah.
that too, you know?
Yeah.
So, I think it's actually a precedent-setting moment because truthfully, the moment that he walks out with the gun, it's a Bond moment. I look at it
Yeah.
as and I think that's why, funny enough, that they do the barrel sequence at the beginning of 6 because
Which is
there's a
great.
part of me that sees the Jason reveal because this kill with the spear gun is the first time we finally see him with the mask on in all his glory as Jason, which, by the way, I want to talk about the fact that this movie never shows us him getting the mask. We see Shelley has the mask, then
Right.
we never see Shelley again until he's dead. So we never actually see Jason kill him and get the mask.
It's
What
so
a
funny because
weird fucking thing.
that's the story because obviously they had no clue this was going to be as iconic as it was going to become. This was a look that this wasn't going to be Jason's look. This is going to be a let's replace the bag for a moment. We'll do this for now. We'll figure out something else later on. And all of a sudden it's stuck for the next like 20, 30 years or whatever. So they don't need to show us. They kind of must be kicking themselves in the ass now they didn't show us because what iconic scene you have to have the idea when he sees the mask and takes it on. We have one in 2009's remake because they got a chance
Yeah.
to make it work. But yeah, I agree with you. It's such a weird, bizarre choice.
It's so odd. And it kind of shows you never know when something's going to latch on a very specific way. And like for such a small thing, in hindsight, it honestly becomes the biggest pop culture moment of a slasher since Michael. Like, it's
Right?
a huge deal. And he
It
walks
is
out in
very
that
huge.
hockey mask and it stays iconic
Right.
for the rest of time. And
Absolutely.
yet there's
Absolutely.
no explanation other than he must have taken it from Shelley, who is killed off screen.
Right.
So, anyway, going off of that, what's funny to me is when Jason walks on screen, it's definitely kind of done in a Bond-esque, like, walks up,
100%. Yeah.
turns, stares at her, pulls the trigger on the gun, and shoots her in the eye. Like,
Right.
it kind of feels like a very direct homage to the gun
Yeah.
barrel sequence, which
Yeah,
then
absolutely.
again arguably is very funny when you get to Friday 6 when it actually opens with the same thing.
Right, absolutely. I love that's my favorite parts about 6 too, the opening. They Friday the 13th opening, they know how to open the movie basically. They get better each time. That's why I'm so glad I fallen in love with the disco version now, because that was definitely another take I didn't like, but now I'm all in on, so it works. But the sixth one is probably my favorite opening.
Easily, and I love 6 because it gets out of its own way, and I don't, if I'm remembering correctly, it doesn't start with any flashback stuff. I'm a little burned out by the time we get to 3, and it has to start with the previously on Friday the 13th. Like,
Right.
I get why they have to do it because again, at that point we didn't have movies
VHS.
in mass on like VHS and stuff, so they're trying to make sure people know. But every time now, it's almost comical because I think of what happened with the Rocky 4 director's cut, where when Stallone went back and edited it, he was like, "I wonder if people haven't seen Rocky 3 in a while," even though he knows how popular these fucking movies are. So, like,
Right.
it's not like people have forgotten what happens in Rocky 3, but for some reason, the opening 10 minutes of Rocky 4's director's cut are a 10-minute version of Rocky 3.
Right. It's awful. It's awful.
It's awful.
And these
And
movies specifically are like 90-minute movies at most, usually under 90 minutes in some cases. And you're taking away 6 to 10 minutes to something we've already seen. I mean, it's you're losing real estate here.
yeah, and again, I do get the point of it. I do understand why they're doing it, but it doesn't make it less frustrating. You know,
Makes it
like
frustrating more of the binging era when we're doing marathons and stuff. It does make it worse for sure.
it really does, and I guess that's also just a sign of the times, right?
Yeah,
Because there was a world where I don't think that they anticipated guys like you and I sitting down and watching all the Friday the 13th movies in, consecutive days or whatever. But here you and I are watching all the Friday the 13th movies consecutively in order. And now, because of that, we suffer the consequences of, well, back in my day, yeah, well, back in your day, you didn't have VCRs. Now we do. Cut that shit off from the top. Like, let's trim this son bitch. Like, come on now. It's just a weird thing.
And you know what? It's not that much longer that it takes off, because, quite frankly, I always tell this story. One of my favorite horror stories of my own making was when Jason Goes to Hell came out in 1993. My friend and I rented all 8 Friday the 13th, and we watched them overnight in a period of like 24 hours. We just started like 8 or 9 in the morning and watched 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then went to the theaters to see part 9. And that was not that long after.
Exactly.
9 years later, really. It's amazing to me how that works. But it is what it is. It's not the end of the world. It's a 5-minute thing. It's okay.
No, it's not.
But
And it's a stupid thing to be like caught up about, but it's just funny because I was really feeling it again last night because I saw that I looked at the runtime on this and I was like 96 minutes. How much of the opening of this movie is about to be the last movie? And
Yep.
I started it and there we are reliving the end of the last movie again. And I was like, God damn it, man. Like, here we go again. Like, we're doing the thing again. It is what it is. Like,
I timed it 6 minutes. Not as bad. It's less than
so
1 or 2, but it's still
okay.
out there. I remember correctly, but the
Right.
last one we talked about, I think they did one. It was like 7 or 8 minutes, maybe 9 minutes, even potentially. It's like they cut it down to 6 minutes. So
I'm just sitting there going, like, let's speed it up. Let's go. Like, speed it up. Go. And they don't do that. And it's really frustrating where I'm just like, I just want to get to Jason killing people. I just want to see Jason with a hockey mask killing people in 3D.
Absolutely.
So I got to ask you, as we're talking about this, I postulated that I thought that this had some of the best kills so far in the franchise. Do you agree with that? And which is your favorite?
I agree with you for the most part. I will say, before I answer my favorite, I'm going to answer my least favorite first.
Oh, you have
My favorite. I do have a least favorite because when a band has a hit single
and then they decide to
and
cover it again?
they basically remake their next single is the same single. It's just done a little bit differently, but it's basically the same song.
Yeah.
But it's obviously also lesser than because it's not the original. Like it feels cheapened. It's the hammock bed scene. Like
The Debbie death.
it's exactly the same death as Kevin Bacon, except for it's not a bed, it's a hammock. And so it makes it even worse because there's holes in the hammock, so it's not even as impressive. I remember in Friday the 13th Part 2, we had the two people through a bed, which was still kind of a riff on it, but I didn't love that riff, but it was still better. This just felt like I don't get what you're doing here. You're basically like, it's like, I don't know how to kill, I don't know, just do the bed thing again. Like that's what it kind of felt
My
like.
favorite part was watching Crystal Lake Memories and Tracy Savage being like, I didn't realize we were riffing on the Kevin Bacon thing. I was like, how did you not know? Like, how did you not see that it was being done exactly the same way?
Exactly. The only thing good about it is the fact that she took up Fangoria and started reading Fangoria magazine.
Right.
Otherwise, yeah, I liked her character too. My favorite death sequence, my favorite kill, is where I go down. I like the squeezing head with the eye popped out, especially because I really didn't like the character. Kind of like the harpoon,
Right.
but there's part of me that goes back to all the time. I don't know why. It's the death of her boy. I forget her name again. The boy, not Chris, the one that we just talked about, Debbie. Debbie's boyfriend there, the one who walks
Andy.
on his hands, Andy's hand walking thing. Because I got to tell you, I watched this movie. I'm like, there is no way that this hand walking thing was in the script. There's no way they went, we got to find an actor who can walk on his hands. There's definitely a thing where the actor just started showing off on the set one day and started walking around on his hands. And like, mine was like, we could make that kind of a cool kill. All right, you got to make that part of your character now. Because he does it like
I actually love that. I think you're 100% right, and that makes a lot of sense, and that is more hysterical to me.
Right? Because I feel like
I hadn't thought about it that way.
I feel like that's what the way to do with these films. They riff on these films. They kind of make things up as they go along a little bit, and they're like, "Oh, we'll do it." And sure enough, he walks on the sands, and Michael. He sees Jason. He gets like the shot from below, and then, boom, right down the middle. I love that sequence, and love that you see him packed up later on over the top of the hammock.
Oh yeah,
down on the Fangoria.
That's one of the best kills in the movie. I'm really sad we don't see how Shelley is murdered. I really am. I mean, we see the aftermath of it, obviously, but I just really needed to see him, taken care of.
I get that. I also understand why you don't, though, because you have to go for the joke because he had the fake deaths like twice already. So in order to have him come out and even like he fools the pothead girl, but also kind of almost fools the audience. Like, wait, is he faking it again? Oh shit, he's not faking it this time.
Boy who cried wolf, if you will.
Absolutely. But if you see Jason do it, you can't fool the audience that way. I think the audience pretty much knows that, oh, this is not faking this time. But he adds to that part of the joke, so to speak, or whatever. But yeah, I wish.
Now, here's the other thing.
Go ahead.
The character of Ali is great until you realize also that he just like disappears for a portion of the movie, only to reappear again in the third act just to die again.
That threw me for such a loop. I remember watching the sequence. Yeah. You see the whole gang die, basically. You see the woman pitchforked, you see the guy thrown down, and you see what you think is Jason like macheting him to. I mean, he takes a couple of shots at him with the machete. You think there's no way he can survive that. So what is he doing there? I don't know. But then all of a sudden, they're in the bar, and there, boom, Ollie just pops up. You're like, wait, what? Did Ollie become the villain of the story, and he's got plot armor? He can survive this kind of stuff? I don't know. I think he's killed again. It's like, what are we doing? What are you doing here?
It's such an odd beat, especially considering, again, Loco Fox and Ali as characters are just kind of there anyway. And I actually like Fox quite a bit. And I wish that there had been more about this riff of them having problems with the kids. Like, I wish that had been built in, and then we had gotten more of them having to like work together. Like, there's an opportunity there to have done something, Yeah,
I agree. Like, you actually could have had Shelley and him and the main guy work together after having their little tete-a-tete at the general store. It makes a lot of sense. It would have been really cool to see. But yeah, the way they did it is weird. I guess that's why it's like so weird that they introduce the gang, they bring them to the barn, and they kill them all, and then it's such a wasted opportunity. But
It's
I don't
just a
know.
very strange thing. Like it just feels very much like one of those, again, of the time, of the era. They're just kind of looking at making the movie as a cheap slasher movie, which again,
Yeah,
I understand. They're not trying to develop the characters, they're not trying to do anything with it. But I see so much more potential in what Friday the 13th 3 could have looked like
yeah,
in like a hindsight sort of thing, because there are all these pieces there that are super interesting that you could have beefed up the movie even a little bit and
right,
ultimately made it a little bit stronger and more even-handed in the story it's telling and stuff like that, you
right.
know?
Um, Now, speaking of things that also were bothersome to me, and this is a small thing. I did like I said, one of my favorite deaths was the Rick getting his eye popped out, which I wish I could see in 3D. A couple of things I wish I could have seen in 3D, like some of them, like the popcorn, whatever, the yo-yo. I don't really care if I saw it was in 3D. The spear gun coming at me,
Yeah, I was gonna say, what about the pole that, Harold is using?
Joker, right? The obvious
Harold,
choices.
where are you?
The eye popping out, those would have been cool to see in 3D. But the funny part about that is we see Chris come out of the camp or come out of the cabin or whatever. He's like, Rick, Rick. And then you fade back. And like right around the corner is Jason keeping Rick silent. And I'm sorry, like that close away, he can keep Rick absolutely silent. Rick can't like slam onto the wall or something. It just seems so like cartoonish and like, okay, I know what you're trying to do here, but it's stupid. At least have him like be further away or something. I don't know. It just bothered me a little bit when I watched it. I know stupid things that bother you during these kind of movies where nothing always makes sense, but like it's those little things
Yeah,
sometimes get me.
I get it though. Like it's one of those, you know, that in any capacity he could have done something more. Also, I gotta say, they throw in this random bit about Andy and Debbie also having like Debbie's pregnant.
Yeah, what a random like, weird fact. They kind of keep dropping on you to like they drop
Yeah,
it on you in the beginning, and you're like, okay, and never really comes into play except for like one other time they mentioned it. And you're kind of like, why? What is the point of this? What is the point of this conversation? Except for like, is it supposed to make Jason more evil because he didn't just kill one person, he killed a baby as well? I don't know what they're going for here on this.
it's
So
just
weird.
such a random thing to add in that adds nothing of substance or
No.
clarity to the movies.
Hmm.
And or this movie in particular, and I just find it very, like, odd. It's just oddly placed, oddly said, oddly handled, other than to be like, "Oh, look at this, Jason killed a pregnant woman, he's evil," and it's like, "Yeah, but Jason kills literally everyone anyway." Like,
Jason doesn't know he's
I
pregnant.
don't need it. I don't need to feel sympathetic for her extra because of that. Like, it's a very odd choice
Yeah.
to garner sympathy for a character who's just clearly underwritten.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like this. It felt like exactly like that. Like the potheads had you're a pothead. This is you're the pregnant girlfriend. That's your character. Although it's kind of weird also watching it in the 2023 era where she's a pregnant woman who she does turn down smoking marijuana, but she's gonna have beers and everything else and have no problem with it. But like it's like they say that and there's no issue with it with anybody. It's like there's no comment on it. There's no pause. There's no concept of it. It's just yeah, everyone's gonna have a beer, no problem. Yeah, it's such a like you'd never see that
Yeah.
today. There'd be some kind of like talk conversation about it with somebody. It's weird.
It's just such a weird thing, man. Like I really enjoyed this movie more than I was anticipating, as weird as I have also been hard on it. But it's
Yeah.
also because I just see so much potential where I'm actually more frustrated now in hindsight, where it's like there's so much you could do here.
Right.
I can see
Absolutely.
these pieces being put together and being really awesome. And dude, I gotta say, the final confrontation with Jason is so good
So
at the
good.
barn.
Yes. Yes. It's kind of funny you mentioned that because my son, who I watched stuff recently, is not a horror guy. He
Yes,
doesn't.
I know. We've talked about this. You raised him wrong. Continue.
I know, I know. I actually told him I feel bad that it makes me sad that you don't. He just doesn't like he doesn't. He might still grow into it. It's like he thinks they're stupid. He doesn't get scared by them. He's just kind of like he keeps watching this and he watches Jason Hack. He's like, how the hell is he not dead? That's what he said. I'm like, I know he's. It's part of the charm. It's script armor, plot armor. And he knows everything. Kind of just like, whatever. But it's true though when you watch it, like this whole Bartlett bench, like he gets hacked up. You're like, how is he gets hung? He gets everything else. You're like, he's still living because he's not super. It's like it's supernatural. I'm like, well, kind of, not quite there yet. This is still a man. Then how is he? I don't know. It's the way they wrote it.
But, yeah, and of course, as we find out, he's not wrong. But also, like the third act of most of these movies is just a dream sequence anyway. Is what I've at this point, at least, is what it seems to come to every single time. And here's talk about all the good with the bad. Then we try to do exactly the thing you talked about earlier. You know, when you have that hit single and you try to make that happen again, but this time you change it just a little bit so that it doesn't sound quite the same, but it feels real the same. So why don't we have the final girl out in the middle of the water and have someone jump out of the water and pull her under the water and attack her? But this time it's going to be Mama Voorhees and not Jason. And I'm sorry, what the fuck are you trying to do?
Mama Voorhees, who was decapitated, so she has no body. She was never in the water to begin with. Like, it makes no sense, even on a nonsensical level. You're still like, what are we doing here? What? Yeah, it's a dream sequence. I get that. I get it because, like, finally, it's funny though. I've seen these hundreds of times too. This is the first time I'm like, okay, this is. Because I've always been kind of like not thinking about it too much. I'm kind of like, yeah, it could be a dream sequence, could be real. Who knows? They kind of leave it vague. I mean, you're watching through now. It's like this definitively has to be a dream sequence, obviously for various reasons, and that being one of them. Because quite frankly, this was like the stupidest thing they could have done. And if it was anything but a dream sequence, it's even worse.
Yes.
But what a cheap stunt.
It just frustrates me. Like, it just frustrates me. Instead of it being like a good moment, I'm just like, not really. Like, don't love it. Doesn't make sense. Even it. And here's the thing: none of these characters in the movie even know who Jason is or reference him as Jason. So why would she even have a dream about Mama Voorhees?
Yeah.
Why in God's green earth? Why would Chris even remotely think of Mama Voorhees in that moment?
She wouldn't. And that's the end of that. I mean, it is the worst ending by far, at least of the three. I want to wait before I set up the franchise because I got to watch the rest of them to reinvigorate what my endings are here. But I have a hard time imagining a stupider ending. It's like the Jason jumping out in Friday 1 is okay as a dream sequence. It actually makes sense because of everything story around it. So I get that.
It's still very jarring and not my favorite, but I can give it a pass there.
Yeah, you could see where it makes sense to a degree, at least as a dream sequence. Two's ending was very weird, and like the whole idea of like she killed him or thought she killed him in his shack, and then he comes back in the dream sequence, and then all of a sudden they wake up and they don't know where Paul is and all that stuff. It's kind of weird, bizarre, but like it's like, okay, whatever. This is just dumb. This was just dumb. And Crazy Chris is much worse than Crazy Ginny. Crazy Chris is like fucked up, and like you're like, it's all too much at that point.
They don't have quite a handle yet at this time on PTSD on film, and how it should be handled a little better.
Right.
Which is ironic considering later Steve Miner would make H2O, which we have covered. Obviously, H2O was the 7th Halloween film, and it was the first to bring back Jamie Lee Curtis since Halloween 2. And I have made the argument time and again that I think that H2O might have handled Laurie's PTSD better than even I thought 2018's did, because I felt like it actually gave her character agency in the situations and how she handles herself. It felt very real to me in how she handles that stress and that trauma of what happened.
Agreed.
So the fact that, I mean, and again, it's a, what is that, a 15-year difference between him making this movie and that movie. But in 15 years, just how much PTSD being handled in Hollywood could change and look, especially on a woman specifically.
100%.
Because, a lot of the time, to your point, when people talk about the characters, you never want it to be like, well, she's maniacal and crazy and psychotic, and you want the characters to be more grounded. And if they have PTSD, you never want to say that stuff because women are already so frequently looked at as the
Totally.
quote unquote lesser sex. And then, if a woman is, mean to
Hys-
someone, she's a bitch, or et cetera, et cetera.
hysterical. Yeah. And they're
Right.
hysterical. Right.
Hysterical.
Yeah.
Right. But the truth with Chris is at points she is oddly hysterical. And in one degree, I do understand it because she's allegedly been attacked by Jason the year before, as we've talked
Right.
about, and you find out that it's true and it happened. But at the same time, there's not enough build to the moments for it
Right.
to get there because truthfully, Chris and Jason never have interaction again until the end of the movie. I almost wish that it had been threaded throughout. That
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, because they had this whole sequence where she and Rick go off camp or I don't know, the fire, whatever, and the car dies or the car battery dies or something like that, and they set it up, and then they have to walk back. And it's on that long walk back that everything happens, and also they come upon the finale with everybody strung out and everybody's dead already. It would have
Right.
served the story much better if she had been there the whole time, or at least most of the time, rather. Or even if, like, it would have been served better if they had gotten attacked, even if they had gotten away in the middle of the
Exactly.
kind of thing. That would
Well,
have been served
especially
better.
for the Rick character too, specifically because he's so terrible to her
Mm.
for how she's acted since the attack.
He just
And
wants
yet at
sex.
the same time, right, he just wants to get laid. And it's just really aggravating and
Yeah.
really just bad writing.
Yeah.
And all of this can be done differently. And again, I guess the point being is that we want to see Rick die. Like ultimately, that is what we want. Rick should
Yeah.
die, and so we don't want to make him sympathetic. But I do think that oddly enough, you could have made him sympathetic, and it would have ultimately worked.
I agree. Because the thing is also, we talk about characters of her time, and he is definitely of his time, of the 80s, where you look back and you're like, this is wrong. But it wasn't like as egregious back then. It was different. It was kind of was looked on differently. Not excusing the behavior at all, of course, but with that being said, at that time you could have made him a sympathetic character by tweaking it just a bit and bringing Jason on against him, and he could have actually turned and like had an arc, kind of character arc, especially if he could have survived or if he had sacrificed himself saving Chris. It could have been like an actual cool way to give that character a good final end. But no, we don't get that, fortunately.
I am now just in this mindset of I want to get money somehow to like rework Friday the 13th part 3 and like kind of remake it, but
Mm,
through a modern lens, but also give it like the right amount of due to the characters. And
right.
because there is a world, man, this script is not bad. Like it's not great, but it's not bad. But it has all the right pieces to be like a pinnacle Friday film.
You know what I'm gonna say? I'm gonna say something maybe considered blasphemic by some, but I think that you might agree with me and hear me out. I
Yeah,
think if
yeah.
we could have combined Friday the 13th Part 2 and Friday the 13th Part 3 into one movie, we could have had a perfect like sequel.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all, actually.
Because there's pieces of
I mean,
3 we could use.
that's arguably what 2009 does, right? I
No,
mean,
you're
they
not
changed it
wrong.
a
Yeah.
lot, but like 2009's Friday the 13th takes 1, 2, and 3, puts it in a blender, and says, "This is your new movie," and it works, and it's very good.
Right.
Um, but this movie has all the right pieces in like a script phase to make something super interesting.
Yep.
And just doesn't quite get there all the way because it has so many weird undercut moments. And
Yeah.
again, it's really odd because ultimately this is pinnacle Jason of Jason really becoming the character that we know,
Yeah.
but it's just kind of got this weird stuff going on around it that's oddly uncomfortable while you're watching.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And they could have cut that out. I think you just take Ginny and Paul from the first film, or second film rather. They take them, replace Chris and Douche Canoe here, put them in the leading roles. You could just do so. I think there's a lot you could do that could truncate this down and make this a great film instead of a mixed bag. A mixed bag that's
Well,
going to be hard for me to rate because honestly, it's not like it's a mixed bag. I like it. There's some things I love that I would give it like a 4-star. Some things I hate that I would give it like a 1-star. So it's like one of those kind of
honest,
like, I don't know.
I do wonder if in all of this, like, had Amy Steele come back as Ginny,
Mhm.
ultimately, how different would the movie feel? And at that point, you also have to assume that they probably would have done like a full year jump instead
Yeah,
of just a day.
100%.
But also, we didn't bring this up. To the point of all this, Friday Part 3 is still ripping off
Saturday.
Halloween 2.
Yeah, it is. It is still a day
Still
later.
is. It's a day later because Halloween 2 picks up the day after Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
But
This is
actually,
not
it
Friday the
picks up
13th.
almost later.
This is Saturday the 14th.
But shh, don't tell anyone.
I don't get all that.
Don't tell Harry.
I like what you did there. I like what you did there.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know. It's just you can see all those pieces where it kind of feels like 3 was just written in the hopes that they'd still get Amy Steele back, and then when
Yeah.
they realized they couldn't get her back, they just wrote Chris and Rick in to try to like placate it. And I
Right.
think that's why I started to wonder, like, wait a second, am I supposed to know who Chris is? And it was the first time I'd ever had a moment of, because we were covering this for the show, of did I miss something that I was not supposed to have missed before? And I
Right.
started to like doubt myself in knowing the movie.
Right. Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. I feel exactly the same way. I feel like because the background there, and that's what makes the Jason attacks her angle so weird because we as an audience, this is not a series that has missing backgrounds. We feel like we should have seen all of Jason's attacks by now because we were there for his birth in Friday
Right.
the 13th Part 2. There's nothing happened before that. Everything happened before that was due to Mrs. Voorhees. So this is just weird. So when did this happen? Does this happen during Part 2? I don't get it. So I agree. It throws me off too. And to your point, I think exactly. Even though we made mention of the possible hospital storyline, I kind of feel like that was only one alternative. The other alternative would have been Amy returning back, Amy talking about maybe with a new boyfriend at that point. Maybe
Right.
they never found Paul. So Amy and Rick come together, and Amy's talking about last time she was here, this happened with Jason or whatever, and this is what she's trying the trauma she's trying to face to like get past, kind of
Right.
thing. It makes a lot of sense.
Gee, there's a worthy fucking concept of a movie also. Like, there's plenty of versions of this that make sense, like
Uh-huh.
they just do.
I think
And
part
it
of it is the fact they have to rush these things out. They tend to okay, we need to get this out in a year because they want as much money as they can get. And they want to get in and out, done, cheap, dirty, quick. That's what it is.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. It's just really frustrating though,
Yeah.
because and this is not a bad movie. Like, as
No.
much as I'm kind of harping on it, it's actually super enjoyable to watch. And again, I will say, I think this is one of the best third acts in the franchise. I think
Yeah.
it's super fun to watch, even if I think the ending is not the best. I think that everything with Chris actually going against Jason is really well handled.
Yeah.
Like,
I agree.
yeah, I get real tense still when I watch the whole sequence with her in the cabin, because adding the fact that the weather is also involved in it is really interesting, and it actually adds to like that momentum of, oh my god, my adrenaline is rushing because is it Jason? Is it the weather? What's happening here? Which window is he going to come through? Like the great use of having so many open windows and doorways.
Right.
It's a really, really well staged, well put together moment, and
I agree.
I really appreciate it for that.
Me too, man. I do like this, and that's why I have a hard time. Like every time I think about all the things I don't like about it. I'm like, oh, I can't rate this too high. I do think about that third act. I do think about how awesome Jason is, and this is like the arrival of Jason and the iconic arrival of Jason's with his hockey mask. Um, and I do again like some of the things they come up with and some of the storylines, and I like some of the kills they have and everything else. And so I start thinking about that. I'm like, I can't rate it that low either. So I'm kind of
Yeah,
confused on where to go. It's like, I mean, at the end of the
it's
day, this
interesting.
is not one of the ones I'm going to choose. Like if I pick a Friday the 13th movie, there's other ones I'm going to choose before I choose this
Yeah,
one.
I
I
mean,
watch
look,
this in the
Jason X
mix.
still exists.
That's a big one. Jason Lives. If I had to pick one Friday the 13th movie just to watch, I'm like, I'm not gonna watch the whole thing.
Jason
I just want
Lives.
Jason. It might be Jason Lives. It might be Jason X. It might be for me Freddy versus Jason because I like them both. So it's like I get a double dose of both.
Yeah,
yeah,
I do have a real soft spot for that movie. I think that it makes one really critically weird move with Freddy, toward
which was
like with him and some of his dialogue, but otherwise, I really like the movie.
yeah. I mean,
Uh,
it's a throwback to those days where you get the Frankenstein versus werewolf. You get all those kind of like universal monsters against each other. It's that kind of thing with a
yeah,
WWF setting, pretty much, which is fun.
yeah,
And with that, they actually try their damnedest to like throw in all these pieces of lore from the history of both franchises, which is impressive considering continuity is not a big selling point for either of these either of the
no,
franchises.
not even a little bit. Which is also made funnier once you get to Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, which
Mm,
treats all of the continuity as like real specific continuity.
right,
And when you read it, you're like, holy shit, they did it. But you're also like, Jesus Christ, how the fuck did they do that? Because the continuity is so batshit crazy between Friday and Nightmare, and even Evil Dead to a point. Because
right,
I mean, Evil Dead 2 is kind of just a remake of Evil Dead until it's not, right?
right. Yep, absolutely, love it.
So there's that weird thing in it. But all that being said, the fact that the continuity could be so beyond jacked and I can still enjoy Freddy versus Jason tells you that they did understand it and they did make it work. Um, and I still contend that when Freddy versus Jason versus Ash died as a movie, that was just about the moment that Hollywood pulled the plug on the original monsters or not the original monsters, but the slasher genre as a whole from the 80s to try to reboot it and restart it, which is kind of a bummer. And like we're lesser for it, frankly.
Yeah, I fully agree. I wish um, it led to so many remakes and so many different things, and the franchise still has some juice left. And I feel like, yeah, I agree. That was a turning point. I still don't understand why. Well, I guess I kind of understand the rights issues. I know that from what I read, Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell didn't approve of a lot of the things that were going on and didn't really, they were
Well,
harsh, weren't really into it. Um,
Raimi especially, like, once it hit his desk, and I guess his whole thing became, "Well, I actually just wanna do Evil Dead 4."
right, right.
And the problem is then they waited way too long to do that.
Yeah.
So, it just kinda because Ash versus Evil Dead doesn't happen until, 2015,
Wow.
2016. So, like, you wait around almost a decade for it to happen. But, dude, honestly, imagine a Sam Raimi directing Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. Sam Raimi getting to play with those characters would have been something special.
Nuts. Would have been nuts, and I would have been here for it. It would have been so cool. So
I mean,
cool.
not that we're totally going off the rails at the end of this podcast talking about it, but it breaks my heart because ultimately I think that we lost one last cinematic iteration of Bruce Campbell as Ash.
Mhm.
We lost one last go
Iteration.
with Robert Englund.
Mhm.
We lost the original continuity to the Friday films. We lost the
Mhm.
original continuity of the Elm Street films,
Mhm.
and that plug pulling led to remakes of all of them, then
Mhm.
Halloween and Texas, and
Mhm.
it just keeps going.
Yeah, it's sad. What a linchpin you even think about that at this point. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
right? Like, it's a weird moment of you see it happen. That's all she wrote.
Yep. That's it. Wow. It is well. But let's bring it back and wrap up this movie because I'm sure we're gonna have more conversations to say about that when we actually get to Freddy vs. Jason. Um, again, what a great concept. So I can't wait to get there and have that conversation with you about it. But so any last thoughts you had before you start wrapping it up and rank this son of a bitch?
Uh, yeah, I just wanna say, like, ultimately, I know that we come to this every week with the love for these movies and stuff. So when I'm being hard on it, you know, it's not malicious because at the end of the day, I do really like this movie. I think it's super fun, but it was also the first time where I kind of sat down with it very critically.
Yeah.
And saw a lot of the seams where I was like, shit, man, like there's so much here that could be fixed to make a really better film. But I guess at the end of the day, why am I asking for a better film in a Friday the 13th movie? You know, like I know exactly what I sign up for when I show up to these, and this movie is no exception.
Right.
This is really fun in the right ways. I love this hockey mask in particular. This
Right.
is maybe my favorite Jason look outside of 2009.
Right.
So I really dig what they were going for with it, and it really works for me. Um, Jason played, as we know by Tom Brooke is
Richard Brooker, I
Brooker?
think it is.
Richard
Richard
Brooker,
Brooker.
thank
Yeah, you're welcome.
you. Richard Brooker is just really, really good.
Yes.
There's a very cool performance being had here, and I'll say they do make some weird choices with the noises he makes towards the end in the third act during the fights. But it comes with the territory in the same way that if you rewatch Halloween, you're like, why does Michael make weird grunting noises when Jamie Lee Curtis hits him? And you're like, you know what? Fuck it, whatever. Like, yeah, I guess it's still a man under a mask. Like, it's not really just a soulless monster that's not going to make
Right.
noise. It's a man. So
Right.
I really love Richard Brooker's Jason. He's really terrifying. He's really fun. There's some great kills in this movie. I would love to eventually see this in like proper 3D because I would love to be able to experience it the way that audiences did in '82.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is like, we didn't talk about this much. I didn't do my up top thing like I normally do with the budget and all of that. But like at the end of the day, I don't think people realize just how successful this movie is. It comes out in '82. They make it for $2 million. It makes $36 million at the box office, and it is the first film of the summer of '82 to knock ET off of its throne at number one. Like
Yeah.
that's a big fucking deal. Like this puny little slasher film shot in 3D is the film that knocks ET from its number one pedestal to number two.
Right. It's a phenomenal accomplishment. I want to echo what you were saying before. Like we come to this franchise, come to all these movies with love in our hearts. We love horror. We love
I
Friday
have a Friday
13th.
poster right up here. Like you can't see it off camera, but like I have one of the entire franchise right above
Absolutely.
like the computer.
And this is like again, we watched these films hundreds of times. So obviously we understand why people love them, and we love them. We try not to be too critical because we know Friday 13th Part 3 that might be your favorite Friday 13th movie, and it is.
And that's not a wrong answer.
Absolutely have fun with it. I'm glad you.
Unless
love it
it's
as much as
Jason
you
Goes
do.
to Hell, in which please check your brain. But
We try to we do laugh and kid a lot about that kind of stuff, but we're very open minded to like whatever you say. If you
yeah.
have a reason why you love it, then you love it for what you love, and I'm happy for you. It just doesn't work as well for us comparatively sometimes, but we do want to try to find the good in it. I think we did a good job being pretty middle of the road as we found a lot of the good we like. We have some criticisms, yeah, but overall we had a lot to love about that. I think we accomplished that as well. With that being said, I think it's time to give us a ranking here on Friday the 13th Part 3. We rank things here on PLD Projects between 1 and 11 because we always turn up to 11 here on PLD Projects. Small reminder, for Friday the 13th, the original, I gave that a 6 out of 11. You gave it a 7.5 out of 11. Friday the 13th Part 2, I gave that a 7 out of 11, and you give it an 8.5 out of 11. So with that being
I want
said,
to modify my Friday the 13th ranking.
The original. Okay.
Yeah, I would like to put that down to a 6.5.
Okay, wow. 1.5 down. All right. Or 1 down. Sorry, 1 down. I can do math.
I was told there would be no math. I do this in saying that I think it's very clear that I am not, of all the Friday movies, I tend not to go back to the original. I think it's a very well made movie, but it is not a movie that I necessarily enjoy watching as much as the others. And I find this one far more enjoyable to watch, even with all my problems. And I realize now that I enjoy it more overall, but I don't like it nearly as much as I like the second.
Okay.
So I'm going to give this one a 7.
That's not bad. Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to be very similar to you. In that I enjoy Friday the 13th is a film I admired, respect for what it did, for the foundations it made. But again, if I'm going to pick a Friday the 13th movie, I want to see Jason. Jason's the reason why
Straight
I
up,
love
I
the
want to
film.
watch Jason.
That's it. I want
Yeah.
to see Jason murder some fools. So, and that's not to
That's
say
why
that.
I watch these movies. I'm wearing a Friday the 13th Part 3 shirt right now, to be clear. Like, I love watching Jason murder people.
Right.
It is what it is.
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't want to see a Nightmare on Elm Street where it's Freddy's mother being the villain. You know, I want Jason. That's what I come for. So I'm definitely going to always choose probably to watch something else over Part 1. I do enjoy 2 as well. I think 2 is a better movie. I think that 2 has a better performances, a better lead role. Amy Steele is phenomenal in that role. One of my favorites in the series, and I don't think Chris, as played by God, I can't remember. I'm so bad with names. Dana Kimmel.
Dana Kimmel.
I don't think she reaches that level. She's a little more forgettable for me, and I don't mean that in a necessarily bad way. I don't think she's like awful or like that, but just comparatively, I prefer Jenny, and that's part of the main reason why I have to put it just a little bit under 2, which is weird for me because again, this is why I have a hard time rating it because I like Jason so much better. So I want to make it the same. You know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to actually put this at I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna do a 6.5. I'm gonna do a 6.5, which is just underneath 2 for me. Just underneath 3 for you as well. Only 0.5 under you for 3. I almost made it a 7 and 7. I almost like tied it with Part 2.
I think you should. I think
you
should. Simply for Jason, I think you should. This is his debut. This is the mask. This is the first time. Now, granted, we don't see how he gets the mask, but we see it.
Okay, I'm gonna do it because I can do this. You've won me over. Obviously, didn't need to. We twisted my arm too much. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do 7-7 with the caveat of I think that Friday the 13th Part 2 is a higher 7.0 than Part 3 is. If I had to rank them,
you could always move Part 2 up to a 7.5 to argue the difference.
I might. I'm gonna not do it this moment, but I reserve the right to modify in the future potentially as we go on. Now here's a secondary.
I mean, that's the beauty of this because as we're doing it and you start putting the movie like rankings together, you're like, well, actually, this doesn't quite make sense. And then you kind of go back to it and you go, this is why. So I actually like that we have the capacity of going back and doing that.
Right. I don't want to lock us in. That would be no fun at all. That'd be stupid. Don't lock yourself into one. These things change all the time. This could change next time I watch the whole movie.
Here's us on a show called Two Mediocre White Dudes on Film. I think that people already just assume the stupid part, Paul.
Yeah,
I'm going to be honest.
That's very true. That's very true. And we haven't done a whole lot to dispel that, so I'm okay with that.
We really haven't. So, like, look, it is what it is. I'm not going to go out of my way to be like, not that, I like to believe we're smart, but every other part of me goes, there are people who watch this show who I know that they go, good Lord.
Who are you people? Why am I here? Why am I still here?
I appreciate that. Yeah, we're charismatic. We're fun. We like watching slasher movies and talking about pop culture. I don't know what's not to like in this scenario.
You might not like me after I ask this question, but I'm going to start a secondary. I'm going to start a secondary ranking that we're going to do in the rest of the series.
Are we doing what I think you're about to do?
We rank the Jasons. We got to rank the Jasons.
I knew you were going to pull this shit.
So for me, well, then you should be prepared.
Then you should be prepared. But here's the thing, right? Off air, we start talking about the Jason thing, and you even said out loud, you were like, "I've never even thought about ranking the Jasons before," and I like a collective sigh of relief went across my mind when you said that because I was like, good, perfect. There's no world where I'm going to have to worry about this and start trying to rank them. And now you sadistic motherfucker who was like, actually, I'm going to throw this out here now. So now we actually have to do that on top of it.
Yes.
So you know what? Fuck you, Paul. Fuck you.
Hey, you can say that all you want. I still need your ranking.
God, you're a piece of shit, Paul.
As you all know, I'll give you a little bit of time. As you all know already, I've already said it. I'm going to put part 3 at number 1 right now and part 2 at number 2.
So, I mean, obviously, the Richard Brooker is the number 1 right now.
Okay.
But so you also have to... Here's the problem. Now, do we add in Ari Lehman, who appears as young Jason at the end of the first one? Because that is still Jason.
You're correct. I will allow it. I will allow it. I'll put him dead last in my ranking.
Okay, perfect. Then Steve Daskowitz, our Tony Soprano, if you will, one of the Soprano family, rather. He is the number 2.
He is number 2. Yes. So right now we're in the same boat. We're at 3, 2, 1 at this point.
Yes.
I'm okay with that. Okay, I'm okay with that. And like the difference is here, this is like your Jason for me, part 2 and part 3. This is your part 2 and part 3 are really close together, whereas mine's a little bit further apart. But that's okay. We're both in the same boat. So
What about Warrington Gillette? Wasn't he also technically Jason in part 2? Like, see, this is where it gets complicated.
I'm gonna make this
opened the can of
easier.
worms.
I'm gonna make this easier, I think. Just not the actors playing them necessarily, Jason overall. So
Jason
as
overall?
my 2
Oh, okay.
actors.
Perfect. Never mind. Then because you sent me down a rabbit hole where I was like, I'm about to rank every actor, and I'm like gonna make this a whole thing.
Yeah, I don't think I could do that because even with Crystal Lake Memories, I had a hard time remembering, okay, which actor was in the suit at which time, especially when there was multiple actors in the suits, because that gets too tricksy. Because sometimes, honestly, I think there's parts later on where there's actually multiple Jasons or multiple actors that we don't even know, technically speaking, who is in the costume at what time, or at least not all of the time, rather. So I think we just keep it to the movie. Overall, which movie Jason is better?
All right, perfect. Then 3, 2, 1.
3, 2, 1.
Easy,
There we
done.
go.
Not
Wrap it up.
You really had me like I pulled up the Wikipedia page and I started like in my head being like, shit, okay, which ones are the ones from these scenes? And I'm already like, my mind is now, I'm gonna be thinking about this all day, you piece of shit, because now I'm gonna have to think about this longer than I was anticipating regardless.
Well, I'm always glad to be of service for you and for our wonderful listeners. So thank you, and let's continue. All right, my friend, where can the folks find you?
You guys can find me on, I guess it's X, not Twitter, but I just want to keep calling it Twitter because clearly
that's what everybody else calls it.
Just is. But Threads and Blue Sky over at PJ Campbell. You can also find me on Instagram at that, and just hanging out here doing things. And I'm actually working on some new stuff, so stay tuned. I've got some plans and things, and you'll see me in the spaces soon.
Do I know these plans?
Yes and no.
Oh, yes and no. Even I don't know them.
Yes and no, because there's some things I need to talk to you about privately, because I would like you to, be involved in some capacity.
Participating. Gotcha. Okay, participating. Okay, gotcha. Fair. Well, you can find me at Father Scrooge on Twitter. You can find me at PLD Projects on Threads, and you can find me also on Blue Sky. And you can find me all over this PLD Projects YouTube channel where we do 2 Mediocre Way Twos on film bi-weekly. Holy Snokes every week. We're talking about Ahsoka tomorrow again. I like the fact that Ahsoka's on because it just gives me a prime example. I don't have to come up with I don't have to come up with a topic. We're reviewing Ahsoka.
Yes, correct. What a nice feeling.
It's just easy. It's easier for us. I got my Queen Show Royal Crown Jewels, which you go through every week. We're on Somebody to Love this week, which is a big one, a big fun topic there. And I do a review with Lego where I talk about the 1980s sci-fi franchise. And apparently I'm doing stuff with PJ Campbell soon somewhere where I don't know where, so I'll have to wait and tell you when I find out. But that being said, please like, subscribe, leave the comments, leave the ratings on the audio as part of Gilmore Media LLC, as we are now underneath that umbrella. I believe I made the announcement a couple weeks ago. I'm joined Brad Gilmore's Gilmore Media LLC in a swimming forward together rather than treading water alone mentality. I'm looking forward to working with him a lot. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I think that's about it. Oh, I do a Patreon, patreon.com/PLD Projects. You can join such luminaries as Austin Goodell, Jeremiah Morris, Matthew Kern, Brandon Buckingham, Jeff Alterman, and more. Couldn't do without you guys. I really appreciate you guys. Really help to keep the lights on. But yeah, that'll do it for this week. Next week, or 2 weeks from now, or rather, every week we go every other week. I should say you will see us next week. We were going to go. We are on a bi-weekly basis, but we are sneaking in a special episode. We are covering.
Right. I have to go watch The Nun 2, don't I?
The Nun 2 is coming out since we have already covered the the Conjuring franchise. PJ knocked over his camera. Looks like there he is. There he is.
Knocked over my camera.
Mabel knocked over.
She managed to run under the desk and hit the cord, and the whole thing went.
I was like, what is going on here? Are you being creative?
Uh,
Are you being a director? Okay, that's fine.
no, I was hijacked by a corgi.
Fair enough. Always. We forgive you,
Always.
Corgi. Always forgiving the Corgi. So yeah, we did the Conjuring franchise, and a new entry in the Conjuring universe is going to be in theaters. So we are going to watch The Nun 2 and sneak in that special bonus episode next week before we return to our Friday the 13th Roots and do the final chapter, which I can't wait to talk about because I love the final chapter. I think it's really well done and
It's
probably
a
one of the
bold-faced lie,
quintessential
though.
versions. Yeah, it is a bold-faced lie. I accepted that a long time ago. They can't kill off these franchises no matter what they title them.
Yes, correct.
But yeah, that is. But that is not now. That is soon to be from now. Until next time, stay mediocre. Never underestimate the power of mediocrity. Bye, friends.
Peace out, homies.